Hi, welcome to Sociology 336, Week 8, Lecture 2. We're going to be talking about time at work. So what's up with time in the workplace? Time, if you remember when we read Adam Smith and Karl Marx, is a central component of the capitalist organization of work. Getting workers to put forth more effort for a set duration of time is often the main goal of a manager or a business owner. This is what Marx talks about when he calls the labor process exploitative. This is why Frederick Taylor was advocating for scientific management. He wanted to get people to work as hard as they could during the 8 hours that they're at work. You might also recall that Shoshana Zuboff described the great difficulty workers had with understanding why they needed to show up on time. That discipline of the clock, getting people to pay attention or even care about orderly time, orderly industrial time, was actually quite a bit of a problem in the early days of the proletarianization of work. So nowadays it's common to hear about how fast-paced the world is, and by extension, how fast-paced work is. People often describe themselves as being pressed for time, which is, of course, the title of the book by Judy Wajcman, from which we read an excerpt, a chapter. It's common for people to make a causal claim about technology and the speeding up of work, which is to say that people often think that technology directly causes work to speed up, directly causes the acceleration of everyday life. In this common narrative, new information technologies supposedly cause people to work faster because technologies such as email allow workers to be on call and available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, as we saw last week with Anisha's research on algocracy, there is some truth to that argument. Likewise, when you students send emails to faculty at midnight on a Saturday and expect an answer nearly immediately, not saying all of you do it, but some of you do, well, that also adds a certain degree of truth to the argument that technology causes or enables the speeding up of life under contemporary capitalism. With that said, we also learned in this class that technology's effect or impact is subject to people's interpretation of that technology. In fact, that perspective came, in part, from Judy Wajcman, and she further explores that perspective here. She conducts what is called a time use study, in which she asks workers how they use their time. They answer in the form of time use diaries or journals in which they keep track of what they do, how long they do it for, and whether information technologies were involved. Based on this empirical research, Wajcman presents a much more nuanced and complex portrait of technology's effect on time in the workplace. For example, email in conjunction with smartphones is often thought to cause people to work all the time. But as Wajcman says, it's unclear whether mobile phones cause pressure or stress, or if people in stressful jobs are just more likely to use mobile phones. As she says, it's not possible to determine the causal direction of this association, though she does note that they are strongly correlated. Further complicating this situation is the fact that email is a symbol of overwork and overload, just as much as it might be a cause of those feelings. As a symbol, email often obscures other sources of overwork because people so strongly believe that email is the cause, and that this cultural meaning, this symbolic meaning of email, might actually cause people to inaccurately remember how they experience email in their day-to-day life, which is why she asked them to keep a diary, a time diary of what they do, how they do it, what happened. So what Wajcman finds in her analysis of this data that she collected, what she finds is that people believe that not reading their email will cause them to fall behind. This produces a lot of anxiety and is a way of trying to solve that problem, that embodied kind of affective, emotional problem They read and respond to as many emails as possible in order to maintain a sense of control over their life. Email ease their anxiety by allowing them to feel in control. Paradoxically, the more that they used email, the more overwhelmed and anxious they felt. Yet reading more emails also allowed them to feel more in control. Because email builds up so quickly, workers often ended up extending their working day to maintain that feeling of control, while also increasing their anxiety. So paradoxically, the activity that causes people to feel overwhelmed is also the thing that makes them feel in control. And as they attempt to maintain control, they end up feeling more overwhelmed. This ambivalent circle of anxiety, control, results in extending the working day. Here, one cannot say directly that technology causes this to happen because it's also dependent upon people's interpretation. One can say only that the combination of technological affordances or designs, along with these particular interpretations, these things tend to be associated with particular patterns of behavior. Now, which way the arrow of causality travels is hard and perhaps impossible to identify. So what we as sociologists do instead is identify how these elements hang together in particular times and places. And we do so in order to identify how that constellation or assemblage of elements provides for or prohibits particular ways of being, ways of existing socially. Similarly, Melissa Gregg identifies the cultural importance of time scheduling software that claims to make us more productive. Now, Dr. Melissa Gregg holds a PhD in Gender and Cultural Studies and is currently Senior Principal Engineer at Intel. You might know them as the company that makes the chips in most of your computers. Now, Gregg asks, why do we even want to be productive? Why are we so obsessed with being productive? And she, you might notice, references Max Weber, and says this is kind of the question that he asked in the Spirit of Capitalism way back, like 100 years ago. Well, in the current situation, as good little entrepreneurial citizens in a Western neoliberal economy, we think it best to be as productive as possible. You can see this quite clearly in many of your weekly responses when you talk about how it's good to be productive in the workplace and it's good to be efficient. Most of you tend to adopt a capitalist attitude toward life. As such, you and a lot of other people, you're not alone in this, want to be more productive, more efficient, so that you can use your labor power or your human capital if you really want to fully adopt a neoliberal mindset. You want to use that to produce more for your boss, or if you work for yourself, promoting your personal brand perhaps, then you need to make sure every moment of your day is as productive as possible. There's just one problem. In a knowledge economy, it's very uncertain what you're supposed to do to be more productive. Economists generally find it hard, if not impossible, to measure productivity in the context of knowledge work or service work. Take a computer programmer, for example. Are they more productive when they write more code, even if it's trash, but they just wrote more? Are they more productive when they come up with an awesome software idea, but maybe it doesn't take them that much time? Are they more productive when they correct their colleagues' coding errors? Well, they're supposed to do all of these things, right? But which thing are they supposed to do when and for how long? Where should they focus their efforts to be the most productive? It's hard to say. Alternately, you could think about any of your professors here at Queen's. You might not know this, but we're supposed to divide our time equally between teaching and writing and publishing our own research. Which one makes us more productive? It's hard to say. Are we more productive because we have more students? If we made this class have 1,000 students, would that make me more productive because I am teaching more students? I don't really know. I think the quality of interaction between me and every student would go down. But who knows? It depends on how you want to measure that. Or alternately, are we more productive when more of our students get jobs? Is that a way to measure our productivity? The Ford administration seems to think that that's the case. Not sure I agree, but, that's one way of thinking about it. Or are we more productive when we're publishing research constantly and not focusing on teaching at all, I don't agree with that either, but that's another way of thinking of it. My point here is that it's very unclear where or how we should focus our efforts. What is the best use of our time? And the fact that we have a lot of autonomy in the use of our time in the case of software programmers, people who might work at like Google or something like that, or people like myself and your other faculty members. And I think most of you who might go into a white-collar job of some sort, if you go on to become a lawyer or something like that, there's a lot of uncertainty. So people are always, where should I focus my efforts? How do I make sure I'm being quite productive? This too provokes a lot of kind of nervous agitation or anxiety. Now, in response to this situation, Melissa Gregg argues that productivity apps don't necessarily increase productivity at all. And in fact, it's impossible to answer the question of if they do or not because of that uncertainty in people's jobs. Instead, what they do allow people to do is they allow people to feel in control of a very uncertain workplace, a very uncertain environment. Because workers can't be certain of what they should be doing, they attempt to schedule every last second of every day so as to account for and thus feel in control of time during this uncertain situation. Isn't that curious? So now, in the situation in which we're not regulated as closely as a Taylorist workplace, now people are basically super uncomfortable with that because they're like, whoa, I don't know what to do. And they end up just beating themselves up about time, metaphorically speaking, of course. And I think that's what you see in these two cases, where people are kind of complicit in their own anxiety over time and work. But if we zoom out a little bit farther, well, the entire economy is uncertain. And that is producing this anxiety over keeping up with your email, this anxiety over making sure every last moment is productive. Right? We no longer have stability at work, even in so-called standard employment, which would be your, 40-hour week, situation, which you have a boss and stuff like that. So it's something to think about. I mean, really, based on my own research, that is closely related to some of this stuff, and that you've read parts of it, it strikes me as that working today, especially in relation to technology, kind of oscillates between this fascination and excitement on one hand and this intense anxiety, this intense uncomfortable dis-ease, perhaps even alienation on the other hand. And these don't necessarily resolve themselves. They just kind of push and pull against each other. And that is what it is to work in contemporary capitalism. Well, on that high note, I'll see you on Wednesday, and have a good time. Until next time.